Good morning. Today is Monday, December the 8th, and it is story time with Saima. And today's special story is Little Red Riding Hood. You might have heard of this story before, but or maybe not. So, this is about a little girl called Little Red Riding Hood. It's not like her real name, and you'll find out in the story why it's not her real name, but this is what the story is about. So the story says, once upon a time, there was a kind little girl who lived to wear, who loved to wear a bright red cloak with a bright red hood. She wore the cloak so much that she became known as Little Red Riding Hood. So nobody called her by her real name anymore because she was always wearing her red cloak when she was out. So everybody just called her by what she was wearing. So here's Little Red Riding Hood, and there's her mother on the side. Little Red Riding Hood lived with her mother on the edge of some deep, dark woods. Map of the wood, deep, dark woods. So on one side of the deep dark woods, there was a Little Red Riding Hood. She lived in a cute little cottage with her mother. And on the other side of the deep dark wood was Little Red Riding Hood's grandma. That's her mom's mom. And she lived in a cottage too, but on the other side of the deep dark forest. So there's lots of trees in the forest. And can you see the two cottages on the opposite side of each other in terms of direction? Little Red Riding Hood lived with her mother on the edge of some deep dark woods. On one day, Little Red Riding Hood's mother gave her a pot of vegetable soup. And she said, "Take this to your grandmother," she said. "She's not feeling well. Now don't you go wandering off," said her mother. "Always remember the rules of the woods. And the rule of the woods are keep to the path, don't talk to wolves." "I will," promised Little Red Riding Hood, and she set out along the path. At first, the sun shone brightly and the birds sang. Little Red Riding Hood skipped happily through the woods. So Little Red Riding Hood, mom gave her a pot of soup, and she wants her to take her to her grandma who's sick. And so Little Red Riding Hood is going out to see her grandma all by herself, carrying a pot of soup. And her mother is telling her to make sure she goes straight from her home to her grandma's home and don't stop along the way and talk to any wolves or strangers. So Little Red Riding Hood sat on the path to her grandma's home. She hummed a tune to herself, bent down to tie her shoelaces, and waved to a woodcutter. "Good morning," she called. "Good morning, Little Red Riding Hood," he replied. So here is the Little Red Riding Hood, and there is the woodcutter. Can you see it? Maybe it's not as bright here. Maybe I should have turned on the lights. Little Red Riding Hood walked deeper and deeper into the woods. It grew darker and darker. So Little Red Riding Hood didn't see the wolf waiting for her on the path. And the wolf didn't see Little Red Riding Hood either. And it's getting dark in the middle of the forest. Little Red Riding Hood stepped on the wolf's paw in the dark and dropped her basket on his head. Smack! The wolf fell on the ground. "Look where you're going," said the wolf huffily. "But you were right in the middle of the path," said Little Red Riding Hood. So here's the wolf. And Little Red Riding Hood, she had forgotten the rule: don't talk to wolves. What have you got in that basket? Asked the wolf hungrily. Vegetable soup, she replied. I'm taking it to my grandmother. Vegetables, cried the wolf. How revolting. I never touch vegetables. Wolf only eat juicy red meat. The wolf was about to gobble up Little Red Riding Hood, but then he had a better idea. Perhaps I can eat a Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother, he thought, grinning to himself. How delicious. The wolf put on his softest voice. Where does your grandmother live? He asked. In the cottage on the other side of the woods, she replied. Why don't you take her some flowers? Said the wolf. The wolf is now thinking that maybe I can eat both Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother if I know where the grandmother lives. Now, Little Red Riding Hood forgot the rules again. She wandered off the path to look for flowers. Remember, her mother had told her to go straight from her home to her grandma's home. Don't talk to strangers or any wolves along the way, and don't stop to do other things along the way either. But Little Red Riding Hood forgot, and she wandered off the path to look for flowers, while the wolf raced off to the grandmother's house. He knocked lightly on the door. Who is there? Asked the grandmother. Your granddaughter, squawked the wolf. I have brought you some lovely vegetable soup. Let yourself in, said the grandmother. I am too weak to get up. The wolf leapt into the house with a huge roar. He sprang across the room and gobbled up Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother. He then climbed into the bed to wait for Little Red Riding Hood. Soon there was a knock on the door. Come on in, he called. Little Red Riding Hood looked at her grandmother. Oh, grandmother, she said, what big ears you have. All the better to hear you with, said the wolf. Little Red Riding Hood came closer to the bed. Oh, grandmother, she said, what big eyes you have. All the better to see you with, said the wolf. So now he's the wolf lying in her grandma's bed, pretending to be her grandmother with her grandmother's cap on. Can you see it? It's kind of dark here, but it's okay. It probably was dark in their room too. Oh, grandmother, she said, what big hairy hands you have. All the better to hug you with. But grandmother, she cried, what big sharp teeth you have. All the better to eat you with, snapped the wolf and jumped out of the bed and gobbled her up. Oh, so now the wolf have already eaten Little Red Riding Hood's grandma and Little Red Riding Hood. Whoa, what a hungry wolf. The wolf licked his lips and fell fast asleep, snoring after eating such a big meal of a grandma and a Little Red Riding Hood little girl. He snored so loudly that the woodcutter heard him. I've never heard the old woman snore that loudly, he thought. I'll just make sure she's okay. Oh no, thought the woodcutter as he strode into the cottage. The wolf's eaten the old woman, but perhaps I can still save her. He picked up some scissors and snipped open the wolf's tummy. So the woodcutter, remember the guy who was working in the woods? So he's hearing the loud snoring of the wolf, and he's saying, oh, I better check up on the old woman who lives in this cottage. She never snores this loudly. And he goes in and he sees the wolf lying in her bed, sleeping. So the woodcutter says, okay, looks like she's eaten the old woman, so I might as well open up his tummy to see if the old woman is still alive in his tummy. Snip, snip, snip. He saw a bright red hood. Snip, snip, snip. Little Red Riding Hood head popped out of the wolf's tummy. Snippety snap. Faster and faster, the woodcutter kept cutting until Grandmother popped out too. Quick as a flash, Little Red Riding Hood ran outside and picked up lots of stones. She put them in the wolf's tummy and sewed it up. Rattle, rattle, rattle. When the wolf woke up, he tried to sneak out of the door, but the stones rattled inside his tummy and made lots of noise, so everybody could tell when the wolf was walking because of the sound of stone in his tummy. So the woodcutter has rescued Grandma and the Little Red Riding Hood, and he has slid open the wolf's tummy to get the Grandma and Little Red Riding Hood out, and then put stones in them, and then sewed it back up. Now everyone can hear me coming. I'll never catch anyone, cried the wolf. Exactly, said the woodcutter. You'll just have to eat vegetables instead. No more red, juicy meat for you, laughed Little Red Riding Hood. From that day onward, the wolf lived on boiled carrots. He never ate another person. And as for Little Red Riding Hood, she never ever talked to a wolf again. See, now the wolf have to make his own soup made of carrots because he can't eat people anymore because of the stone in his tummy. And that's it. So this is the end of today's story. I hope you liked it. So what do you think about the story?